Olá, bom dia a todos e bem-vindos a mais uma SOU Talks, a live da SOU, onde trataremos sobre uma nova abordagem de plataforma de dados em nuvem a partir do Flexible Server na jornada de dados das organizações. Esse tema é bastante novo, mas já está presente na agenda das áreas de tecnologia e dados e vem crescendo rapidamente em importância para empresas que usam os bancos de dados open source, em ambientes on-premise ou nuvem, e é pertinente para todos os segmentos de negócio que tenham dados como parte da sua estratégia de crescimento. Estamos, obviamente, imersos em um contexto tecnológico sem precedentes e temos, ao mesmo tempo, uma diversidade de tecnologias em escala global e acesso exponencial, tudo graças à computação em nuvem. A SOU.cloud nasceu nesse momento especial de mercado e é um dos principais parceiros da Microsoft para clouds Azure e 365 no Brasil, e é também uma empresa 100% dedicada a projetos e serviços em cloud. Meu nome é Rodrigo Castro, sou CTO da SOU.cloud e, obviamente, estou muito feliz de estar com vocês aqui hoje com os nossos convidados especiais. Quem nos acompanhou, ou não acompanhou, mas quer resgatar, nós fizemos uma série de lives sobre a adoção de cloud computing no ano passado e agora, em 2021, estamos focando bastante em tecnologias de Cloud Transformation, porque a tecnologia e o mundo dos negócios não param e as novidades em Data Platform também não. A live de hoje ela vai ser dividida em dois blocos. No primeiro, vamos abrir um pouco o tema de Flexible Server, Open Source Database e apresentar um pouco de novas tecnologias, modelos, arquiteturas, cenários. E na segunda, vamos fazer um ping-pong, perguntas e respostas com os nossos especialistas e os nossos convidados que vocês queiram trazer para a discussão, fiquem à vontade para trazer suas perguntas também. Como sempre, nós temos convidados especiais para as nossas lives e hoje não poderia ser diferente. Mais do que isso, temos um time de peso para conduzir essa atividade com vocês. Primeiro, vou começar pelos pratas da casa, né? O David Soares, Cloud Solution Specialist para Data Innovation aqui na SOU.cloud. Dá um oi para nós aí, David.
Opa, e aí pessoal, boa tarde.
Felipe Feltz, Tech Lead para Data Innovation.
Fala pessoal, boa tarde.
E o Rodrigo Crespi, MVP Microsoft para Data Platform. Tudo bom, Rodrigão?
Tudo ótimo, tudo ótimo. Boa tarde a todos.
Muito bem. Bom, como podem ver, além do time da SOU, né, que muitos de vocês já conhecem bastante, temos também a Crespi DB, nosso grande parceiro para Data Solutions, com quem temos desenvolvido dezenas, centenas, eu já diria agora, né, Rodrigo, de projetos de dados nos últimos anos. Né? E temos também convidados especiais, diretamente da Microsoft Corp nos Estados Unidos. Please, Ms. Deepti Prasad and Avnish Estogi, please open your camera.
Good morning, good evening, folks.
Hello, everyone.
Well, ladies first, I'd like to introduce Ms. Deepti Prasad, Principal Engineer Manager para Azure Open Source Databases, talk to us straight from Microsoft Seattle, USA. Ms. Deepti is responsible for driving customer success, landing and expanding MySQL and MariaDB adoption on Azure. Are you all right, Ms. Deepti?
That's right.
Great, thank you. Thanks for your time. A equipe da Deepti, pessoal, conduz os esforços de engenharia para acelerar a adoção de banco de dados de código aberto, desde arquitetura, roteiro de migração e novas soluções para atender as necessidades dos clientes de open source database em Azure. Tá? Eles também criam novos padrões de arquitetura e são líderes técnicos e de produto para essa linha de produtos dentro do Azure. Tá? I also present here with us Avnish Rastogi, Azure OS engineer at Microsoft, based in Redmond, Washington, advisor and architect with expertise in digital transformation, hybrid cloud, including platform as a service and infrastructure as a service, database and middleware platforms, integrations, IoT, blockchain, edge computing, and a bunch of other geeky stuff. Hi, Avnish. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you, Rodrigo.
Excellent. Thanks for coming, Mr. Avnish e Mrs. Prasad. Nosso objetivo, pessoal, é levar mais empresas a testarem MySQL e MariaDB as a Service Então, após esse evento, vamos enviar uma pesquisa sobre os planos de futuro de cada empresa a esse respeito, mas já podemos aproveitar esse momento aqui para discutir alguns pontos importantes sobre o tema que surgirem durante a apresentação dos nossos convidados, Avnish e Mrs. Prasad. Deepti, in Avnish, I see that our goal will be to drive more customers to try out and adopt MySQL in MariaDB as a service on Azure. So after this event, we will send a survey asking the future plans about these technologies, but we can also explore some issues about it in this meeting, okay?
Great.
Okay. I would like to wish to issue an excellent meeting with our customers, partners, and competitors here in this live, but before handing you the mic, I would like to invite our team for a brief technical introduction of today's theme. Para quem está participando, pessoal, anotem suas dúvidas, que ao final teremos um ping-pong e vocês vão poder fazer suas perguntas diretamente para os nossos especialistas e convidados. Quem não se sente muito à vontade de fazer a pergunta oralmente, coloca no chat em português mesmo, não tem problema, e os nossos especialistas vão trazer para a pauta, vão integrar as perguntas para fazer em inglês para que os nossos convidados possam responder. Bom, acho que eu venci aqui os pontos que eu precisava. Vamos descer a lenha nesse assunto a partir de agora. Quem é que toca aqui? Quem é que dá o início? Felipe, David, Crespi?
Eu posso comentar.
Então vai, tá contigo.
Pessoal, até para assim, para todos entenderem um pouco, a ideia de trazer um tema como esse do Flexible Server, ele é um recurso que ele está sendo disponibilizado para bancos de dados open source. Aqui a gente vai focar em MySQL, mas ele é um recurso que está sendo lançado em GA esse mês. Então é legal vocês conhecerem ele melhor. Ele está no meio do caminho de uma máquina virtual e de um single server. A Deepti e o Avnish vão explicar melhor isso para vocês. Então é legal vocês tirarem todas as dúvidas nesse momento, porque vocês já podem experimentar esse recurso em preview, e como ele vai ser liberado já na sequência, que ele vai ser liberado em setembro, vocês já podem ter um ambiente pronto, né, para utilizar esse recurso em GA, em produção. Então, aproveitem esse momento, a gente está com o pessoal que conhece tudo da tecnologia, então, eles sabem o que funciona por baixo do capô da máquina, então, aproveitem esse momento aí. Passo, de repente, a palavra aqui para o David.
Então, por isso que não tenha muito mais complementos, pessoal. Acho que aqui a gente tem uma oportunidade um pouco diferente de ter acesso a realmente o pessoal que desenvolve o produto, né? Então, diferente de outras meetings, essa é uma meeting nível 400, né? Então, aqui acho que o foco, o drive, ele vai ser totalmente técnico, né? Então, pergunta sobre migração, disponibilidade, vocês estão com as pessoas certas para responderem esse tipo de questão, né? Rodrigo, não sei se tem algum comentário também antes da gente iniciar.
Eu quero deixar só uma informação aqui, que o Flexible Server para PostgreSQL está muito bacana, tem muita coisa legal, e eu sei que o foco da meeting é o MySQL, MariaDB, mas vale ali tirar as dúvidas, entender bem o que o MySQL está prometendo. Quem está usando, quem está pretendendo utilizar Postgres, fiquem atentos, participem de toda a meeting, que vai ser importante. Anotem as dúvidas. Se a Deepti ou a Nish não conseguirem responder agora sobre MySQL, a gente pode ir atrás para vocês, porque para Postgres tem muita coisa bacana também. Então, não deixem de pegar todas as informações ali, principalmente quem está indo para Postgres, que também tem muita coisa bacana.
E um passo importante, né, Crespi? Nós já temos vários clientes utilizando o Flexible Server, né? Seja para piloto, seja em produção. Então, mesmo ele não estando em GA ainda, ou estando agora entrando em GA, nós já temos clientes que estão usando ele em produção e já estão experimentando ele na prática, né? Então, lógica nova, conceito novo, oportunidade nova, a gente não pode perder a janela, né? E tem que aproveitar. E é uma abordagem completamente diferente do que vinha sendo feito até então, tá bom? Vamos dar a palavra para os nossos convidados aqui, né? Deepti, you can start your presentation, please. So enjoy the time, enjoy our audience, and how say our mate, go ahead. Foi mais forte que eu, Fê, não consegui segurar.
So vou deixar a câmera para o Deepti para o admin.
Great. Thank you, team. Thank you for the great introduction and a quick overview of the MySQL and MariaDB services on Azure. Hello, everyone. Once again, so without spending much time, I'll dive straight into the conversation. So some of you may already be customers on single server. So you already have an awareness of what the architecture is like. But some of you, it may be the first time that you're hearing about the Azure managed services for the databases. So we'll quickly run through a small introduction, but we'll focus majority of our time on flexible server, its capabilities, what are the different ways that we can migrate, monitor, and maintain it. So yeah, with open source databases, a lot of enterprises are starting to adopt a lot of open source databases, including MySQL, MariaDB, Postgres, and all of that. And based on some of the analysts, like IDC is one of the leading analysts today, and we see that 70%. Background noise. Thank you. So almost 70% of the organizations today want to have deployments on both the clouds, or at least multiple clouds. So when we talk about this, what better way to do this than use open source databases? So you're not tied in to a particular cloud service, right? And also from DB Engine's ranking, we know that open source databases dominate the database market. MySQL consistently has been in the top 2 databases, and it's continuing to grow much more with enterprise adoption. Postgres, MariaDB have been having phenomenal growth. We see a lot of migrations happening from Oracle to Postgres, and even to MySQL for that matter, in the Oracle space. So with this said, there's a huge focus and increased capabilities with open source databases, even as a community service today. And when we talk about, so it's not just databases being open source, right? When we talk about applications, today what we see is a lot more people, a lot more organizations are starting to not just use VMs to deploy their application services. They're starting to use different orchestration services like Kubernetes service. We see that almost 20% of all open source database deployments have applications sitting on Kubernetes services. And this is growing day by day, and especially in the past year. And so also with Azure App Services. So you can use another managed service to deploy your application and use a managed database service to deploy your databases. So there has been an increased adoption of both Kubernetes as well as app services in this. Right. So when we talk about the database as a platform, so it gives you the flexibility or capabilities of the community open source database service, but it also gives you the world-class capabilities that the other services share. So we just to give you a quick information here. So the same service fabric is the one that's powering majority of the databases on Azure. So you are able to deploy this almost in every region. Currently, we have around 58. I think the number has grown after this 54 into 58 and growing year on year. So it is the similar compute and storage, the Azure compute and storage, along with the backup high availability, disaster recovery capabilities. And as many of you know, Azure has one of the strongest security capabilities. So the common Azure security is the one that's also providing additional capabilities, providing protection to the open source community compliant database services today. And not just that, you don't have to figure out a lot of the integrations, be it if you want to create Power BI dashboards, if you want to have different data pipelines like analytical pipelines through Data Factory or even Synapse, or pipe it into some other, say, machine learning services, you can have your ready integration services available on Azure as well. So we can discuss this in detail as and when you have something to implement. But in the interest of time, we'll focus on the database service alone today. So as of today, there are two ways you can deploy MySQL or MariaDB or even Postgres, any of this open source database, as a managed service. One is the single server capability. So this is the service that has been up and running since 2018. Majority of the customers are today on single server. It is a Windows-based VM. It has a huge architecture takeaway from the SQL Server, and we have lots of mission-critical applications running on single server. But we have re-architected the single server to be much more suitable for open source databases. Avnish will cover quite a bit into the flexible server architecture, but this is the product that is in preview today. Almost for the past 1 year, we are in public preview, and a lot of customers, even some of the gaming customers today, are on production on flexible server. We plan to go get this into GA in a month or so. So by the end of September is when we're targeting to go GA with flexible server. So we'll discuss about the differences of single server and flexible server in detail later, but there are two ways that you can deploy today. Again, for most of you who are using managed database as a service, so it gives you the flexibility. As we discussed, you get all the benefits of a community open source database like MySQL, MariaDB, Postgres. So all of the managed database services in Azure are community compliant. And with single server, it also brings in built-in high availability. So you get 4 nines of high availability. And we'll talk about a TCO later and rest of the features later. But you can almost leave the managing of the database to us and only focus on what is your, say, the next product development that you need to be doing or feature enhancements. So all of the maintenance, performance monitoring is something that you can, even patching, even security patching, OS patching, all of that is handled by Azure. Yeah, and Azure as an industry standard has one of the lowest TCOs. So as compared to majority of our competitors. So here's an example, but that said, this is for a high availability TCO scenario. So your total cost of ownership with 4 nines of HA, you're going to be paying as minimum as possible on Azure. And you can also optimize your infrastructure sizing, right? So you can deploy on a particular SKU, and you can easily scale up or scale down on the compute and storage. You can scale up as and when you need. You can also scale up and scale down across general purpose or memory optimized based on how high your say volume of traffic is going to be. Let's say there's a holiday season, you see huge amount of traffic, then you can scale up and your memory, your SKU, and then you can scale back down during your normal traffic hours. So we have even more flexibility with flexible server that we'll cover later, but this is a quick overview on say this what single server today provided. And for those of you for whom single server is new, so here's a quick overview of the architecture. So right now, when we talk about a database server, we segregate that into compute and storage. So what you see as server is the compute part of the database engine. And to provide you flexible features on the storage side of things, we almost have 3 additional copies or backups of your storage. So all incoming connections get routed through a gateway. Since this is a multi-tenant application that we maintain, the gateway is the one that helps route all of the incoming connections to your particular server. And let's say there is an issue with the compute, or there is some particular downtime that is happening on the particular compute. What happens is there is a new compute that gets set up, and all of your incoming connections get directed to this new server, and it will automatically reconnect to your already existing storage. So this is how we are able to provide flexibility during downtimes, or if there are any periodic maintenance check, if there's an hardware issue, all of that is automatically resolved in a matter of seconds. So also with the storage. So let's say there is some kind of an issue on one of the storage. Since we also maintain 3 other backups, we will automatically use the alternate storage for for connecting to the server. And today we have whatever is the latest minor version, we plan to support that within the next 6 months or so. So that's our general leeway time. We want to test it out, ensure it's stable, because with every new minor version, sometimes there are breaking changes. Some other times we need to also ensure that there are not enough bugs, it's just in a stable state. So currently, we support both versions 5.7 and 8. We were supporting 5.6 until end of life this February. And on MariaDB, we're planning to support 10.4 soon, but right now 10.2 and 10.3 are the latest versions that we have. So moving forward, again, you have flexibility in how you want to deploy or manage the services. Many of the people who are new, you can start off through the Azure portal, but eventually move on to CLI or even custom managed applications, right? Even with, say, infrastructure as code through Terraform. So that is one of we see almost 50%. So 50% of our customers use portal and the other 50% use CLI to manage their database instances. And the backup capability. So you automatically get free backup as much as whatever is your storage size. That is the amount of free backup that one is going to receive. And automatically, the minimum backup retention time will be 7 days. You can extend it up to 35 days as well. Right. So we provide monitoring, some basic monitoring services through the monitoring blade within the Azure portal. You'll be able to see what CPU, IO, and the different metrics. But that said, if you want to write advanced scripts and monitor a lot more of the services, say even at a table level, you can do so because through Azure Monitor. So we can pipe the metrics through log analytics, and we can pipe it to Azure Monitor. And through Azure Monitor, you can use, you can write scripts to monitor a lot more and build custom dashboards as well. So we provide the capability to use the basic monitoring or additional integration capabilities for advanced monitoring services as well. And in addition, we have the query store capabilities. So with query store, you're able to see, you can turn it on and check whenever there are any slow running queries, or even you can observe, we have query performance insights. So by turning on query performance insights, you can see which are some of the queries that are having wait times, which are triggering some of the wait times. You can also see which are the most frequent queries that are being run in case you want to optimize that. So all of this is available through the query performance insights blade on the portal. Additional intelligence. We continue to improve this and add many more recommendations into performance recommendations. Whenever there is some kind of an index missing, there is some part of a tuning that can be done to increase the performance. So this is a continuous activity, and it adds more intelligence gets added month on month. Here. So yeah, quickly finishing up on the single server. We have a ton of customers today across different sectors. So it's not just say gaming, retail, that we see huge MySQL, MariaDB adoption, but we are seeing a huge even financial services industry, and a lot of SaaS products, SaaS applications also being built on our platform. Happy to get into the details as and when needed. I quickly want to give Avnish the time to spend on flexible server architecture, additional features and details. So thank you. Off to you, Avnish.
Thank you, Deepti. I will take the control now.
Sure.
Okay. Is it coming fine? Oh, I see the.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you guys. So I'm going to talk about the flexible server architecture. So one of the key difference on the flexible server architecture is the option to do multi-zone deployment. So when you deploy a single server instance, you can select the region. However, in flexible server, you select the region where you want to deploy the instance. In addition to that, you can also deploy the zone where you want to provision your MySQL flexible server instance. And within the region, we have the compute, which is based on the Linux operating system. So if you recall, Deepti mentioned single server is based on Windows operating system. Here, flexible server is based on Linux operating system. So we are aligning with the open source community where all the development happen on the Linux operating system. And then you have the storage, which is also in the same zone. And finally, application. So with this architecture, now you can ensure both your application as well as database instance are in the same zone. And finally, you have the backup. So all the artifacts required to deploy your application can be in the same zone, which will minimize the network latency for your application and database communication. And finally, from the high availability architecture perspective, so you have the primary instance deployed in zone 1. And if you choose, you can do multi-zone deployment, where you will have the second instance, in this case in zone 2, and there is a sync replication between your primary instance and second instance. If something happens in the primary zone, we will automatically fail over to the secondary zone without any data loss. So it gives you protection not only against the zone, not against the region, but also against the zone failure. Another key difference between flexible server and single server is the maintenance option. So on the single server, we only support system managed schedule, where Microsoft picks the window between 11 PM and 7 AM local time to do the monthly maintenance. However, on the flexible server, we have two options. One is custom maintenance window, where you can pick a 1 hour window any day of the week, and we will do maintenance only during that time. And then you also have the system managed schedule. And we always maintain 7 days gap between system managed schedule and custom managed schedule. So it gives you flexibility to ensure that your application functionality and performance is intact after the maintenance. So you can have your non-production instances deployed in with the system managed schedule, where we will do the maintenance 7 days prior to doing the maintenance on the custom managed schedule. And finally, from the network isolation perspective, so on single server, we had public access, same like flexible server. and then we had private endpoint. On flexible server, public access is same, where you restrict the firewall by adding the IP addresses. But in addition to that, we have the private access, where you can deploy your flexible server instance in the virtual network where your application is deployed. So you can have both your application as well as database instances deployed in the same VNet. Alternatively, you can have your database instance in a separate VNet than your application instance. In that case, you will do the VNet peering between those two VNets. And SSL is enabled by default, so we have end-to-end secure communication. By default, all the data would be encrypted. In addition to that, data in motion is also always encrypted as well. And even though we have not GA'd flexible server, which is scheduled sometime next month, but we are also seeing huge adoption and great customer feedback in terms of the performance and the reliability of the service. Now, when we look at the differences between single server and flexible server, so all the features Deepti reviewed on the single server are available on the flexible server as well. In addition to that, I mentioned about the network isolation. So on flexible server, we support VNet injection, and CMK would be available at the time of GA in private preview. Reserved instances would be available when we GA on the flexible server. Cross-region replica will come sometime after the GA, and uptime SLA will be announced at the time of GA as well. Now, I have a couple of reference architecture to highlight the point Deepti mentioned, that all the database services are built on the same service fabric and same Azure compute and storage architecture, which gives us seamless integration with the Azure ecosystem. So you can build a comprehensive architecture using all the different Azure services. So in this case, we have application deployed on app service, which is one of the application managed service. And you have customer contacts maintained in the Azure DB for MySQL. We have Redis cache for the application caches. Cosmos DB, which is a multi-master, multi-region deployment service for site content management. And then you have Twitter feed coming into Azure database for my Postgres using logic apps and functions. Another architecture we have is for the fault tolerant e-commerce application. So you have identical infrastructure deployed on two regions, where you have the traffic manager to route the traffic between these two regions. But we are using MySQL database for the product catalog and Redis cache for the caching as well, and to store the product images, we are using site content. Now, for existing customer, one of the key question is that, okay, I have existing workload running on premise or in Azure, another cloud provider. How do I migrate my databases to Azure database for migration, Azure database for MySQL, regardless of whether it's a single server or flexible server? So we have three options for customers to do the migration. One is dump and restore, which is offline migration. So we can do the backup of your databases on premise and then do the restore in Azure database for MySQL. Another offline option is the Azure database migration service, which is a PaaS offering in Azure. Again, it's an offline migration, but it gives you a graphical interface which you can use to migrate multiple databases from your on-premise to Azure database for MySQL. And finally, we have this native logical replication, which will give you near zero downtime migration option. So if you have a tier 1, tier 2 application where you cannot tolerate more than 30 minutes outage, this is a great option. At the high level, we use dump and restore to do the initial seeding, and we set up the native logical replication to keep the changes flowing between your on-premise and Azure environment. And during the brief outage, you can switch over from your on-premise to Azure environment. And we have done multiple migrations for different customers where we were able to migrate successfully in less than 30 minutes outage. So we can open it for the question, Rodrigo.
Hey, Avnish. We don't have any questions right now, so I think that you move on. Yeah.
Sorry, I was talking in mute, Avni. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead, please. Anything we need to clarify further in the slides we reviewed so far?
Lippy?
Yeah, actually, we have one question right now.
Yeah.
Is from Marcelo. Can we have Postgres with data replication scenarios with a single primary writer and a multiple read replicas readers? Avnish.
Can you repeat your question again, please?
Yes. Can we have Postgres with data replication scenario with a single primary, like a writer, and multiple reader, like multiple replicas, like readers?
Right. So yeah, so we didn't cover this well. So on single server, we support up to 5 read replicas. And those read replicas could be in the same region where your primary instance is deployed, or they could be in the different regions. So with read replica, you can offload your read-only workload to the read replicas. In addition to that, you can use one of the read replica for disaster recovery situation. So let's say you have primary deployed in central US and read replica deployed in East US. You will have async replication between your primary and read replica. If something happens in the East US primary region, you can switch your read replica to read write instance and update your application connection string. So there are two use cases for read replica, just to recap: offloading your read-only application workload, as well as for the disaster recovery. And same apply for the flexible server as well. However, flexible server at this moment doesn't have cross-region read replica. It supports only within the region. And we are planning to have cross-region read replicas towards the end of this year.
Nice.
Right. Yeah. So just we generally don't have, just to add to what Avnish mentioned, we don't have a limit on how many replicas that we can set. Right now on the portal, yes, we set a limit, but in case you want, say, if your application needs, say, 10 replicas or 12 replicas, there is a possibility for us to open that up as well. All you need to do is open up a support ticket and request for it.
I think that I will open the microphone from who can ask some question. Pessoal, eu vou abrir os microfones agora. Quem quiser perguntar por áudio, pode ficar à vontade. Como a gente entrou agora na sessão de perguntas, aproveitem esse momento para a gente fazer as questões. Avnish, we have one question from Edson. Can we migrate Azure for MySQL from single server to a model to a flexible server without downtime?
Yeah, no, we can do those migrations as well. It will require some outage. The approach I mentioned with near zero downtime migration, we can migrate from single server to flexible server with less than probably 5-10 minutes outage. The thing I want to highlight here is that, so from the migration perspective, we can definitely limit the downtime. But prior to that, we need to make sure that application functionality is intact and performance is acceptable. So we can definitely do the migration with near zero downtime.
Yeah, in this case, we need to use DMS, or is
no, we don't need to do.
Go ahead, Deepti, please.
Yes, thanks, Avnish. So I have just posted one link here in the chat window. So we have two ways that we can do that. So if it is a considerably smaller database, when I say smaller, say less than 100 or so GB, then we can use this script. So this script will help to migrate firewall rules, users, everything that you have on your single server to flexible server. So that is one way. The other way is the through data and replication, right? So you can create a replica on flexible server with primary being a single server. And so there are some additional steps to set this up. I think we'll be able to share the documentation. And whenever you feel that the entire sync has happened, you will be able to cut over to the flexible and make this flexible server as the primary server.
Yeah, great. We have another question from Marcelo. Is it possible to apply some OS tuning on Postgres, the instance, like Linux TCP tunings?
So we are exposing a lot of parameters which we can use to fine tune the database. However, because it's a PaaS service, you won't have access to the OS environment.
Feltes, posso falar?
Opa. Claro. Pode falar.
Tá. Deixa eu só começar. Eu quero pegar algumas coisas ali que o Marcelo passou. Marcelo, sobre a tua pergunta de alta disponibilidade, cara, dá uma olhada nos CITOS, ver se não resolve o teu problema com Hyperscale, tá? Acho que, apesar de ser uma abordagem um pouco diferente, talvez resolva esse teu problema de ter múltiplos readers distribuídos. Tá? Outra coisa a outra pergunta que tu fez ali, sobre a possibilidade, mesmo para o Flexible Server, tu não vai ter acesso de fazer tuning no Linux, tá? Tu vai ter acesso apenas à camada do SQL, a única coisa que vai mudar é, por exemplo, ao invés de usar o nome completo para acessar a base do Postgres, né? Tu vai usar ali o PG usuário, ao invés de colocar o PG usuário, Postgres.azure e assim por diante, tá? Fora toda a construção. Tem algumas pequenas diferenças, mas no básico, assim, a única coisa que tu vai saber é que realmente está rodando em cima de um Linux e que tu vai ter algumas mudanças ali quanto ao usuário. Fora isso, a parte de sistema operacional continua tudo igual.
Uhum. Esse é um ponto bem importante, né, Rodrigo? Porque, inclusive, o Single Server e o Flexible Server, apesar de eles serem parecidos, o Single Server, que é o recurso atual que está em produção, ele é um pouco mais limitado com relação à parte de parametrização do banco, e o Flexible Server vem também para abrir mais essa parte de configuração de parâmetros que estão mais quase voltados ao sistema operacional, né? Mas é no banco ainda.
Eu acho que no futuro a tendência é melhorar bastante, tá?
Uhum.
Guys, I have a question for you too about the memory per core. The memory is related to a core. It's correct to say that we have a NUMA node for core, or it's not correct?
Sorry, can you repeat the last part of the sentence? Is it what is the memory per core? Is that the question?
Yeah. We read in the documentation that about memory per vCore. Okay, the memory is related a core, or you have a 2 gigas for 4 gigas for 4 vCore. I want to say it's correct to think we have 4 gigahertz for a NUMA node vCore, or not relate to cross memory for the vCore.
Right. I was not able to get the complete question, but just to give you information, right? So I'm putting it in the chat window. So it is based on what is the SKU, right? Let me just type that out. So let's say it's single server and you're using a general purpose machine, this is the memory that we have. So you'll get 5 GB per vCore if you're using single server. And for the same on flexible server, you will get 4 GB per vCore. But that said, for your entire database engine, right? So let's say if it's MySQL, you'll get a lot more memory on your buffer pool instance because this is a Linux VM. There is almost hardly any memory that the OS is going to take. So there's a very small percentage. But on single server, the Windows VM was taking some amount of memory from this particular thing. So you will almost get the same, almost 4 GB per vCore for general purpose machines. For memory optimize, you get almost 8 GB per vCore.
Okay, it's okay if I think the 4 GB per vCore. If I have 2 vCores, we have 8 gigas, and we have a dedicated 4 vCore. For example, the vCore have 4 gigas and another vCore 4 gigas, or it's our 8 gigas for all vCore.
Yeah, you get 8 gigas for 2 vCore machine. You get complete 8 vCore.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Another question, just no one talking. In my tests, when we stop PostgreSQL, I made a lot of tests with PostgreSQL in Flexible Server, right? And my tests, when we stop a PostgreSQL, we stop to pay for computing, but
Yes.
I continue to pay for the storage. In MySQL, it's the same.
Yes, it is the same because though you will stop it, we will need to maintain the database. We'll need to maintain the storage, right? So, but what we'll do is we'll take down the compute. So there will be no compute costs. So if, let's say, the impact will be bigger whenever you have a 32 vCore, which can be expensive, right? So you can stop it and you will not be charged for the compute.
That's important. Pessoal, eu acho que é interessante só deixar isso bem claro em português, porque assim, várias pessoas tentaram tirar essa dúvida com a gente. No Flexible Server, vocês podem parar o serviço do banco de dados, que é como serviço, e para de pagar a parte de computing, mas continua pagando pelo armazenamento, porque os dados estão lá, obviamente. Então, eu tenho um caso de um cliente que é desenvolvedor, eu não sei se ele está aqui na reunião, mas ele me disse, mas eu preciso parar o meu ambiente de desenvolvimento de noite, de manhã, para economizar dinheiro. O Flexible Server é uma solução, tá?
Inclusive, aqui tem um ponto bem importante que o Rodrigo está tocando, porque o Flexible Server, ele é o meio do caminho, né? Então, ele está mais próximo do que seria uma máquina virtual do que o single server, porque até na parte de configuração de sizing, onde no single server eu defino quantos vCores eu preciso, e aí cada vCore tem uma quantidade de memória, que foi a pergunta que o Rodrigo havia feito anteriormente. No caso do Flexible Server, a configuração é feita como se eu estivesse definindo o size de uma máquina virtual. Inclusive, eu consigo definir séries diferentes, né? Então, eu sei exatamente quantos vCore e memória eu vou estar utilizando para aquele banco, e ele pode ter tamanhos diferentes, quantidades diferentes, né? Diferente do single server, onde numa camada standard, por exemplo, eu tenho sempre a mesma quantidade de memória por vCore. Então, o Flexible Server ele também tem essa característica diferente do single e que pode ajudar bastante. Né? Rodrigo, eu não sei se tu tem mais uma questão, eu tenho mais 2 perguntas.
Não, as minhas acabaram.
Legal. Guys, I have 2 questions about versions. Can I upgrade the database version without creating a new database, like 7 to 8?
Technically, yes, you can migrate from 5.7 to 8. We just need to make sure that your application is functioning fine, because that's where if, there are some unique features you are using. That's what we need to make sure. But yeah, from the migration perspective, you can do the migration.
Nice. And how does work the minor upgrade, like updates like 8.1 or 8.2? It's transparent. I need to do something on portal.
So for minor version upgrade, this will happen through the monthly patches. So
Okay,
you don't
okay.
have to do anything. But right now we are thinking of providing a capability where you can choose to get that particular minor version upgrade, test it out on your dev test servers, and then land it on your production servers.
Okay, great.
Right. And to what Avnish was mentioning, that is also the capability with this custom managed window, right? So what is a good practice can be that you keep your dev and test environments on custom schedule, so on system managed schedule, right? So we will handle the maintenance for that, the time and the date. But for production servers, you keep it with custom schedule. That is, you control when you will run the maintenance on that. So what this will do is there is a minimum of 8-day gap between custom schedule and system managed schedule. So let's take an example. So today is 26th. So let's say today is your system managed schedule date. So 26 plus 8, minimum of 8 days. So until 3rd September, only 3rd September, you will get your custom schedule update on your. So you almost have 8 days to test out, and you can cancel the update on your production servers. Right.
Nice. Does this feature exist only on Flexible Server? Yeah.
Yes.
Nice.
Feltz, teve uma pergunta do Berdan, que já foi respondida ali no chat, mas acho que é legal. O Berdan perguntou se depois de migrar para o Flexible Server, se tem algum tipo de parâmetro que deveria ser prestado atenção ou se depende do cenário, por aí vai. E daí a Dipti já respondeu que em Flexible haverá mais de 400 parâmetros de serviço versus 200 no single server. Então, acho que aqui já mostra um pouco também das possibilidades que a gente tem com esse novo tipo de serviço. And, another question I would like to ask Deepti or Avnish, take advantage of the fact that we have some people from the project area here in this meeting is, what are the tasks they do not more to perform when starting using Flexible Server, typically platform as a service, and if possible, an overview about the cost comparison between the Flexible Server and virtual machine with MySQL, for example. Is it cheaper, more expensive, how many %, or there is no comparison for now? Please go in advance.
Yeah, great questions, right? So when we talk about what are some of the tests, right, the first part of the question, so we would request the customers to first do load tests, right? Ensure whatever your because the SKU, right? You may be using a particular SKU on single server, or you may be using a particular SKU on another cloud or on premise. So the first check that we need to do is check whether I have my right SKU size. It's the number of vCores and the amount of storage, right? Because with single server, And Avnish also covered some part of that. With single server, what happens is the number of Iops. Let's say you have a write-heavy workload. If you have a write-heavy workload, that means you're going to do a lot of disk operations. You know that with every disk operation, it's expensive, it's costly. Costly in the sense, costly in time. It's going to take few milliseconds. So how we calculate Iops is number of storage. So let's say you have 100 GB storage, so 100 into 3. So you get 3 Iops per GB. So your maximum IO that you can do is around 300 Iops. But if you have a much higher volume of transactions, you may want to change the size of the storage so that you get all of the Iops. Right, so SKU size, storage size are very critical. So doing that load tests initially will surely help. And then the next is possibly the VNet integration, the networking capabilities. So verifying what are your network settings. So that might be the other next possible way, because in single server, we support private endpoints, and we got a lot of feedback saying that a lot of customers prefer complete VNet integration, right? So with flexible server, what we have provided is you can have private IP over complete VNet integration. So setting up your VNet settings, that will be the other critical part apart from the normal checks. And then we also got a lot of feedback, especially for MySQL. We have a lot of packaged applications which don't use SSL. In single server, SSL was it was compulsory, but in flexible server, we now provide this capability to also disable SSL if your application needs that. So yeah, I think taking a look at these settings, in addition to right sizing with load tests, that are some of the must-do things. Avnish, please add on if there's any.
I think you covered very well, Deepti.
Okay, thank you. And Rodrigo, to your second part of the question, right, on the pricing. So right now with flexible server and single server, it's the same price, right? You're not maybe a few cents lesser. Flexible server may end up, but overall, from a total cost comparison perspective, flexible server may end up to be much less expensive, especially with the smaller workloads, right? Why? Because two things. In single server, if you had, say, kind of a reporting workload or a batch workload, you need to actually go into a general purpose server, have a bigger SKU. But what we have done with flexible server is we have something known as a burstable server, right? I'm trying to see if we have a slide on that. But yes, with burstable server, what it does is 30 minutes in a day, you get burst of CPU. You can use that higher increased CPU, and then the number of credits build up over the next 24 hours. So let's say if you're running one big batch workload once a day, you can actually use burstable SKU, which is almost a single vCode machine. And so we've got great feedback for running some of the smaller workloads with burstable CPU. So that can actually save you a lot of cost. The second reason why you can save a lot of cost with the flexible is we have Iops scaling availability. So what that does is in single server, if I want high IO, the only way I can do that is increase storage, right? Because you get 3 Iops per GB. If I want more IO capability, I want to increase storage. And this is a one-way street, right? Like if you scale up storage, you can't scale it back down. So though my data is say 100 GB, because I want more IO, I may have to pay for 300 GB. right? So we got this feedback, and what we've changed with flexible is you don't need to change storage, right? If you just want 100 GB, you use 100 GB. But what you can do today is increase Iops. In the server blade, you can see a line where you can actually use that to increase Iops. Let's say next issue. So let's say next week I have some kind of a campaign, right? Just for next week, I want higher volume. So what I'll do is just increase Iops, scale Iops, and then scale it back down. So this is a two-way street. So you don't need to always pay up for higher IO as you will do in single server. So I think these two big advantages and same costing with much better features, you will possibly save a lot more on flexible. Hope this answers your question, Rodrigo.
Yes, very good. Thank you for the answer.
Pessoal, não sei se nós temos mais perguntas aqui. Nossa programação, ela a princípio estava até às 3 horas, então já passou 2 minutinhos. Mas caso vocês queiram compartilhar mais alguma dúvida, ou eu percebi que a gente tem alguns clientes na sala que já utilizam alguns bancos de dados, como Postgres e MySQL. Se vocês já quiserem compartilhar como é que está sendo a experiência de vocês, ou mesmo fazer algum questionamento aqui para o time, fiquem à vontade, tá ok?
O pessoal tá tímido hoje, viu, Felipe?
Exato.
Pessoal, são 3 horas da tarde, essa live fica disponível depois para todos consultarem no nosso site quando for necessário, quando quiserem compartilhar com outros colegas, é material público que a gente faz para a comunidade e para os nossos clientes, obviamente. Então, eu vou tomar a liberdade aqui de acreditar que estamos todos satisfeitos e agradecer a participação e dúvidas de todos, especialmente Deepti e Avnish, por todo o conhecimento em primeira mão que trouxeram para nós aqui no dia de hoje, né? Sigam-nos nas redes sociais, mantenham contato com o nosso time. Vou pedir aqui que o David, Felipe, Crespi abram de novo as câmeras aí para a gente fazer o fechamento aqui. Aí, muito bom. Cadê o David? Essa iniciativa aqui, ela foi uma casualidade bem aproveitada, pessoal. David e Felipe enxergaram uma oportunidade e conseguiram trazer essa super oportunidade aqui de trocar informações em primeira mão com o time de produto da Microsoft diretamente numa live exclusiva aqui, tá? Então, parabéns, pessoal, pela iniciativa. Fiquei muito feliz, assim, curti muito, aprendi pra caramba no dia de hoje, tá? Mas, se estamos satisfeitos, né? Vamos encerrando por aqui. Deepti and Avnish, thank you very much for participation. I'm glad to your presentation, and we are all satisfied. And I appreciate everyone's participation in questions, especially Deepti and Avnish, of course. Thank you guys for coming. David e Felipe, suas últimas mensagens, Crespi também, e vamos encerrando por aqui.
Pessoal,
thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, everyone.
Pessoal, obrigado pela participação de todos. Essa iniciativa, na verdade, de trazer novidades para vocês no mundo Azure, ela não se encerra por aqui, então é legal a gente saber também o que vocês estão interessados em conhecer, se é alguma coisa mais relacionada à parte de data ou parte de aplicação, porque daí a gente também pode trazer um conteúdo mais direcionado. Então, obrigado por vocês participarem aqui da nossa live, e nos mandem mais conteúdos ou dúvidas que a gente tenta buscar novos arquitetos, novos engenheiros aí para falar com vocês.
Sem esquecer do trabalho gigante que a gente tem feito em Data aqui com o time da Crespi, né, Rodrigão? Muita coisa a gente consegue matar dentro de casa, mas essa em especial era Breaking News, que tem esse hábito, esse ótimo hábito de sempre tentar trazer Breaking News para essas comunicações mais das nossas lives, né? Rodrigão, Se o David não quiser falar nada, que ele está lá aborrecido, eu vou pedir para tu encerrares, então.
Okay. Thank you, Dipti. Thank you, Avnish. It's a pleasure to see you. And it's a great session for us. E, pessoal, muito obrigado pela presença. Eu acho que a iniciativa foi excepcional mesmo. Feltz e David, parabéns pela iniciativa. Acho que nada mais legal do que a gente ter essas informações de primeira mão e pelas pessoas certas, né? Não é por qualquer folhetim, né? Temos de primeira mão pelas pessoas corretas. Então, parabéns a todos. E obrigado pelo convite de participar aqui.
Encerramos? Pessoal, boa tarde a todos. Então, bom trabalho para o resto de semana que ainda temos. Dipti, Avnish, thank you very much for coming. It was nice, very nice. Thank you very much. See you guys.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.